Hey guys, tonight we begin Wisdom straight into the choking dust and blinding sunlight of ancient Rome. Sometime in the 1st century AD, when the empire is loud, crowded, and very much alive. You are standing just outside the city walls, staring at a skyline of tiled rooftops, temple columns, and thin streams of smoke rising into a pale blue sky. It smells like baking bread and animals, and something else you can't quite identify but already suspect you won't enjoy. You adjust your modern expectations, take one hesitant step forward, and I regret to inform you, you probably won't survive this week. Not because you're weak, not because you're skipped leg day, but because ancient Rome plays by rules your soft, air-conditioned brain has never had to consider. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, comment your location and local time. I love seeing where in the world you're drifting off from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk through the massive city gates, joining a steady stream of traders, slaves, soldiers, and citizens. Rome is enormous at its height. It holds perhaps 1 million people, making it one of the largest cities on Earth. That's your first mainstream fact of the evening. 1 million souls packed into a space without modern plumbing, refrigeration, or zoning laws. You feel the crowd immediately. Bodies brush against you. A cartwheel rolls dangerously close to your foot. A donkey brays in protest as someone shouts in Latin you barely understand. Historians still argue whether Rome truly reached a full 1 million residents or hovered somewhat below that number, but whatever the exact figure, it feels overwhelming. You are swallowed by humanity. The streets are narrower than you expected. Tall apartment buildings insulely lean, slightly overhead, some rising 5 or 6 stories high. They block out much of the sun. Laundry hangs between windows like surrender flags. Somewhere above, a woman dumps a bucket of suspicious liquid into the alley. You learn quickly to walk near the middle of the street, though that comes with its own risks. Traffic in Rome is chaotic. During daylight hours, large carts are technically banned to reduce congestion, a reform credited to Julius Caesar. But that doesn't mean things are peaceful. Smaller wagons, pedestrians, stray animals, and vendors shouting about olives and garum create a constant roar. Garum, by the way, is fermented fish sauce beloved across the empire. You catch a whiff of it from a nearby stall. It is powerful. The Romans drizzle it on everything. Meat, vegetables, even fruit sometimes. You try not to think about how long it sat fermenting in clay jars under the sun. You continue deeper into the city. The forum opens before you, a bustling heart of political speeches, legal disputes, and casual gossip. Marble columns gleam. Senators in white togas glide past with forced dignity. But the marble glamour hides something beneath your sandals. The ground is worn uneven from centuries of footsteps. You nearly twist your ankle. Survival tip number 1. Watch where you step. A group of children runs by, barefoot, laughing. A slave hurries after them, arms full of scrolls. Slavery is everywhere here. Perhaps 1/3 of the population in Italy consists of enslaved people during certain periods. That's another sobering fact. You try not to stare, but you can't help noticing the metal collars on some necks engraved with instructions to return them if lost. You realize something uncomfortable. In this city, your survival depends almost entirely on status. Are you a citizen, a freedman, a slave, a woman, a foreigner? Rome is structured like a vertical ladder, and you have just arrived without knowing which rung you occupy. A loud argument breaks out nearby. 2 men are debating grain prices. Rome depends heavily on imported grain from Egypt and North Africa. If shipments fail, the city panics. Emperors maintain power partly by controlling bread distribution, the famous bread and circuses strategy. Keep people fed and entertained, and they're less likely to riot. Usually, but riots do happen. Food shortages spark unrest. Fires spread quickly. Political tensions simmer under the surface. You glance up at the tightly packed wooden balconies and imagine how easily flames could leap from one building to another. There's a strange comfort in knowing Rome does have an organized fire brigade, the Vigiles, established under Emperor Augustus. They patrol at night, watching for blazes. Yet historians still argue whether they were truly effective firefighters or more like night watchmen with buckets. Either way, if your insula catches fire, you'd better move fast. You pass a shrine embedded in a wall, a small niche with a painted household god. A woman stops to leave a tiny offering. Religion is not optional here. The Romans believe the gods influence everything: harvests, health, politics, your morning mood. Even crossroads have protective spirits. You feel watched, not just by people, but by divine bureaucracy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Romans wear small amulets, shaped like little fists or even tiny phalluses, to ward off evil spirits. Protection charms are serious business. You make a mental note to invest in one. Immediately, as afternoon heat settles in, you notice the smell intensifying. Waste flows through open gutters along the street edges. Yes, Rome has the famous Ploca Maxima sewer system, an engineering marvel originally built centuries earlier. But not every building connects to it efficiently. Chamber pots are still very much in use. You narrowly avoid another splash from above. You're thirsty. The good news? Rome has aqueducts delivering fresh water from miles away. Public fountains dot the city. You approach one shaped like a carved lion's head. The water runs cool and surprisingly clear. This is Rome at its best: engineering brilliance combined with public access. Still, you hesitate before drinking. Your immune system, accustomed to filtered tap water, is about to meet a whole new microbial universe. As evening approaches, shadows stretch across the stone streets. Torches flicker to life. The city doesn't exactly quiet down, it transforms. Conversations soften. Tavern doors open wider. Somewhere in the distance you hear the rhythmic clang of metal. Perhaps a blacksmith finishing late. You're exhausted already. It's only day one. You haven't secured stable housing. You don't fully understand the language. You don't know which neighborhoods are safe after dark. You're painfully aware that medical knowledge here is limited. Social mobility is restricted. And one wrong step could put you at the mercy of laws you barely comprehend. And yet, there's something mesmerizing about Rome. The scale, the ambition, the way marble temples glow under torchlight. You feel small, insignificant, and strangely alive. But survival isn't about admiration, it's about adaptation. And right now, as you stand in a city of perhaps a million strangers, breathing in smoke, spices, sweat, and sewage, you begin to suspect that your modern instincts, privacy, personal space, quiet nights and luxuries you won't find here. The eternal city doesn't care about your comfort. And this is only the first sunset. You wake up to shouting, not the gentle buzz of an alarm clock, not bird song drifting through a sealed window, but the full-throated argument of two strangers 3 floors below you, amplified by stone walls and wooden beams that were never designed for privacy. Somewhere, a baby cries. A vendor is already advertising hot bread, and from the alley you hear the unmistakable splash of something hitting the pavement that you very much hope is just water. You're in an an apartment block that houses most of Rome's urban population. It seemed affordable enough when you stumbled into it last night, guided by a landlord who sized you up in a single glance and quoted a price that felt suspiciously flexible. Now, in the grey light of dawn, you see the place more clearly. Your room is small. The ceiling slopes slightly. The walls are cracked. There's no glass in the window, just wooden shutters you can close against rain and noise, though they don't do much for either. You're several stories up, and that's not a privilege. In fact, the higher you live in an insula, the poorer you probably are. Lower floors are sturdier and more expensive. Upper floors? Cheaper, flimsier, and far more likely to collapse. That's your mainstream historical fact for this stretch of survival. Roman insulae were notorious for structural instability, built quickly and cheaply to accommodate the city's swelling population. Some reached 5 or 6 stories tall. The poet Juvenal once complained about the constant fear of buildings falling down around him. And he wasn't exaggerating much. Collapses were common enough to be a known risk of urban life. You sit up carefully, as if your movement alone might test the building's integrity. Outside your thin door, footsteps thud along a shared hallway. You quickly realize there is no such thing as solitude here. Entire families cram into single rooms. Cooking happens indoors over small braziers. Smoke seeps into corridors. Fire is the ever-present threat. With wooden beams, open flames, and tightly packed structures, it only takes one overturned lamp to turn your home into an inferno. Emperor Augustus did attempt to regulate building heights and materials after devastating fires, but historians still argue whether these reforms were consistently enforced or quietly ignored by profit-hungry landlords. Standing here, staring at a support beam that looks like it's contemplating retirement, you suspect enforcement might be flexible. You head downstairs, stepping cautiously over a loose plank. The stairwell is narrow, twisting, and dim. There are no handrails. You pass a neighbor carrying a bucket of water up several flights, because upper floors rarely have direct water access. If you live high, you haul your own water. Outside, the street is fully awake now. The noise from yesterday feels amplified in the morning rush. Bakers sell loaves through open shop fronts. Donkeys pull carts piled with vegetables. A group of laborers argues over wages. You try to breathe shallowly, but the air carries a mix of charcoal smoke, livestock, sweat, and the ever-present undercurrent of human waste. You realize something unsettling. Sleep here is a negotiation, not a guarantee. Night brings its own symphony-drunken laughter, distant singing, barking dogs, clattering carts allowed after dark when traffic restrictions lift. That's another fascinating detail. Heavy carts are often permitted to move at night to avoid daytime congestion, which means when you're trying to rest, iron-rimmed wheels rattle across stone roads beneath your window. Rest deprivation alone might finish you before disease does. You wander a few streets over and spot a water fountain, fed by one of Rome's famous aqueducts. The aqueduct system is genuinely impressive, massive arches carrying fresh water from distant hills into the city. Some historians estimate hundreds of millions of litres flow daily at Rome's peak. Public fountains make water accessible to all citizens, at least in theory. But there's a social layer to even this blessing. Wealthier homes often have private connections. The poor wait in line. You take your turn cupping cool water in your hands, aware that upstream contamination is always possible. Rome's engineering is brilliant, but sanitation science is still centuries away from understanding bacteria. A man nearby is selling something unusual, jars of human urine. Before you recoil, know that urine is actually taxed in Rome under Emperor Vespasian. That's your quirky tidbit for this section. Public urinals collect it, and it's sold to fullers' workers who clean and process cloth, because ammonia in urine helps whiten fabric. Vespasian famously defended the tax by saying, "Money does not stink." Standing here, you're not entirely convinced. You begin to understand that everything in Rome is recycled, repurposed, reused. Waste becomes resource. Even your own bodily functions could be monetized. By midday, the sun beats down mercilessly. The stone streets radiate heat upward. Shade is precious. You retreat briefly into your insula, but the air inside is stagnant. Without cross-ventilation, upper floors become ovens in summer. In winter, they're exposed to biting winds. Insulation is minimal. Comfort is relative. Down on the lower levels, a small shop operates from the building's base. Many insulae combine residential and commercial space. The shopkeeper knows your landlord. He eyes you curiously, assessing your spending potential. Status in Rome is visible through clothing, accent, posture. Your modern haircut alone might raise questions. You overhear two men discussing a recent fire across the Tiber River. Entire blocks destroyed. It happens often enough that residents develop a kind of fatalistic shrug about it. Rebuild, move on, hope it's not your turn next time. Historians still argue whether Rome's density was its greatest strength or its most dangerous weakness. A concentrated population fuels trade, culture, innovation. It also magnifies disaster. As evening approaches again, you climb the stairs to your precarious room. Each step creaks like a whispered warning. You imagine what would happen if an earthquake struck rare, but not impossible, or if the family below you leaves their cooking fire unattended, or if thieves decide upper floors are easier targets because escape routes are limited. You lie down on a thin mattress stuffed with straw. It rustles beneath you. Outside, the city continues its restless motion. Someone laughs loudly. A pot shatters. A baby resumes crying. You try to relax your breathing, but your mind won't stop calculating risks. Structural collapse, fire, theft, sleep deprivation. You haven't even considered illness yet. By modern standards, you already feel stretched thin. Your senses are overloaded. Your privacy has evaporated. Your safety depends largely on luck and the integrity of beams cut from trees long forgotten. And it's only your second night. The eternal city hums beneath you, vibrant and indifferent. You begin to suspect that surviving here isn't about strength or intelligence. It's about endurance, about tolerating discomfort as a permanent state. You close your eyes, hoping the building stays upright until morning. You wake with the dull ache of interrupted sleep and the very real problem of hunger. There is no refrigerator humming reassuringly in the corner. No pantry stocked with sealed packages. If you want breakfast in ancient Rome, you step outside and join the living tide of the city once more. The morning air is already warm, thick with the smell of baking bread drifting from nearby ovens. Bread is the backbone of your survival here. In fact, your mainstream historical anchor for this stretch is simple. Rome relies heavily on grain imports, particularly from Egypt and North Africa, to feed its massive population. Without that steady supply, the city would starve. Emperors know this. That's why they organize the Annona, the state-sponsored grain dole, to distribute subsidized or free grain to eligible citizens. If you're lucky enough to qualify, you stand in line with thousands of others. The queue moves slowly. You shuffle forward inch by inch, surrounded by murmurs about politics, weather, and rumors of delayed ships. A missed harvest in Egypt can ripple through Rome like a shockwave. Historians still argue whether the grain dole was a generous social safety net or a calculated political tool to prevent unrest. As you wait, stomach growling, the distinction feels academic. Bread is bread. When your turn comes, you receive a portion of grain uncooked. That means you either grind it yourself or take it to a miller or baker for a fee. Convenience is expensive here. You decide to pay a small amount to have it baked, watching as dough is slapped against the interior walls of a communal oven. The result is dense, slightly coarse bread, darker than what you're used to. You tear off a piece. It's warm, it's filling, it's not exactly fluffy, artisanal sourdough, but it does the job. You quickly learn that most ordinary Romans eat simply: bread, porridge made from wheat or barley, olives, maybe some cheese, lentils, onions. Meat is less common for the average urban dweller. Wealthy elites feast on roasted dormice and exotic imports. You, on the other hand, are grateful for olives that haven't spoiled. And then there's wine. Water is available, yes, but wine is safer in many cases because fermentation reduces harmful microbes. So you drink wine diluted with water. Always diluted. Drinking it straight is considered barbaric. You take a cautious sip. It's sour, thin, nothing like modern bottled wine, but it hydrates you more or less. A vendor nearby is selling garum again, that fermented fish sauce you smelled on your first day. It is wildly popular. Some varieties are expensive, aged and refined. Others are cheap and intensely pungent. You watch as a customer drizzles it over a bowl of beans without hesitation. You try a small drop. It tastes salty, sharp, surprisingly savory. Your modern palate protests at first, then reluctantly adjusts. Here's a quirky detail to file away. Archaeologists have discovered that some garum factories were so pungent that they were built outside city centres, yet the finished product was treasured across the empire. Even emperors enjoyed premium blends. You wonder if somewhere, in a villa far from this noise, someone is savouring a far better breakfast than yours. By midday, hunger creeps back in. Rome is not a place of 3 structured meals for everyone. Eating happens when food is available and affordable. Street vendors sell hot snack sausages, chickpea fritters, small pastries sweetened with honey. You buy something fried, wrapped in a scrap of leaf. It's hot and greasy, and you're not entirely certain how long it's been sitting there. You remind yourself that refrigeration does not exist. Freshness is judged by smell and instinct. Across the street, a wealthy household's door swings open briefly, revealing a glimpse of abundance. Baskets of figs, cuts of meat, slaves moving briskly with trays. Social inequality in Rome is vast. The elite dine reclining on couches during elaborate dinner parties called convivia, where multiple courses are served and poetry might be recited between bites. Meanwhile, you calculate whether you can afford cheese tomorrow. Historians still argue how balanced the average Roman diet truly was. Some skeletal remains suggest decent nutrition. Others show signs of malnourishment, especially among the poor. As you chew your humble meal, you suspect your vitamin intake would make a modern nutritionist faint. Late afternoon heat intensifies. Food spoils quickly in summer. Flies gather. You notice stray dogs prowling near market stalls, hoping for scraps. You guard your bread carefully. And then there's the ever-present anxiety of shortage. A rumor sweeps through the crowd that a shipment from Alexandria was delayed by storms. You feel the tension ripple outward. Grain equals stability. Without it, unrest brews fast. You think about how fragile this system is. 1 million people dependent on ships crossing unpredictable seas. No backup warehouses full of preserved goods. No global supply chains. Just wind, sail, and hope. As evening approaches, you manage to secure a bit of cheese and a handful of dates. It's modest, but it's yours. You retreat toward your insula, passing taverns where men gather to drink stronger wine and gamble. You consider joining them, but decide against it. Your coin supply is thin. Back in your room, you sit cross-legged on the floor, breaking bread in the dim light of an oil lamp. The flame flickers. Oil is another expense. You ration it carefully. You reflect on how much of your modern life revolves around food abundance, late-night snacks, grocery aisles overflowing with options, delivery apps. Here, survival means constant awareness of supply. You don't eat out of boredom. You eat because your body demands fuel, and that fuel depends on harvests hundreds of miles away. Outside, someone laughs loudly. Somewhere else, someone argues about grain prices again. The city never forgets its dependence on bread. You finish your meal slowly, savoring each bite. Hunger is never fully satisfied here. It's merely quieted for a while. And you begin to understand that surviving ancient Rome isn't just about avoiding dramatic dangers like fires or gladiators. It's about enduring small daily uncertainties. Will there be enough grain? Will prices rise? Will your coin stretch another day? You lie down on your straw mattress, belly only partially full, aware that tomorrow you'll repeat this dance again. It's day 3, and your modern instincts, snacking freely, wasting leftovers, assuming abundance, are already being reshaped by necessity. Rome feeds you, but only just enough. By the 4th day you begin to feel sticky. Rome is dusty, crowded, and relentlessly physical. You brush against strangers constantly. Smoke clings to your clothes. Sweat gathers under the midday sun. And despite your best efforts with fountain water and a scrap of cloth, you feel like you're wearing the entire city on your skin. Which is why, sooner or later, you make your way to the baths. Public bathhouses thermae everywhere in Rome, ranging from small neighborhood facilities to massive imperial complexes that feel more like leisure palaces. Your mainstream historical anchor here, bathing is not a rare luxury for Romans. It's a regular social ritual. By the 1st century AD, bathhouses are a defining feature of urban life, often subsidized so even ordinary citizens can afford entry. You approach a mid-sized bathhouse, its brick exterior unassuming compared to the grand marble complexes you've glimpsed from afar. Inside, though, it hums with activity. You pay a small fee and step into the appetitarium, the changing room. There are no private lockers. Instead, niches line the walls where bathers leave their clothing. You hesitate. Theft is common. Some wealthier patrons bring slaves specifically to guard their garments. You do not have that option. You place your clothes in a cubby and try to look confident. From here, the bathing process follows a sequence, though not everyone follows it strictly. You move into the tepidarium, a warm room designed to acclimate your body. The air is thick and humid. Conversations echo off tiled walls. Men discuss politics, gossip about neighbors, debate chariot races. Bathing here is not silent reflection. It's networking. Historians still argue whether the baths serve primarily hygienic purposes or social and political ones. Standing here listening to deals being casually negotiated in steam, you suspect the latter might be just as important. You continue into the coldarium, the hot room. Heat presses against you like a heavy blanket. Beneath the floor, a hypercourse system circulates hot air from a furnace, warming the tiles. It's ingenious engineering, another testament to Roman innovation. Slaves tend the fires tirelessly, shoveling wood to maintain the temperature. You sit, sweat rolling down your back, your muscles loosen. For a moment you almost forget you're struggling to survive. Then you notice something. There is no soap. Instead, bathers coat themselves in olive oil, then use a curved metal scraper called a strigil to scrape the oil and the dirt off their skin. You watch a man expertly drag the strigil along his arm, collecting a thin layer of grime and oil that falls to the floor. You swallow and follow suit. The sensation is strange. Effective, perhaps, but undeniably communal. Oil and sweat mix underfoot. Slaves move through the room, offering additional oil for a fee. And then there's the cold plunge. You step into the frigidarium, where a pool of cold water waits. The shock steals your breath. Around you, men laugh and splash. You lower yourself fully, heart pounding, then emerge gasping. It's invigorating. Brutal, but invigorating. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some smaller bathhouses, the oil scraped from patrons, yes, that oily mixture of sweat and dirt, could be collected and even sold as a medicinal or cosmetic product. Whether that practice was widespread is debated, but the idea alone makes you rinse a little longer. Women also attend baths, though often at separate times or in separate facilities depending on the era and local customs. Social norms shift across centuries. Some emperors attempt to enforce stricter gender separation, others are more relaxed. Historians still argue about how mixed bathing was perceived in different periods. As you move between rooms, you realize something important. The baths are not sterile. They're impressive, yes. Heated floors, vaulted ceilings, mosaics depicting sea creatures. But water isn't constantly replaced the way you're used to. Crowds cycle through. Clean and unclean mingle freely. You try not to think about microbes, and yet, paradoxically, this might be one of the cleaner experiences available to you in Rome. Regular bathing does help remove dirt and parasites. Compared to some other ancient societies, Romans place a high cultural value on bathing. Afterward, you return to the changing room, heart rate steady, skin tingling. Your clothes are still there, Victory. You dress quickly. Outside, the late afternoon light feels softer. You notice that after bathing, people linger. They exercise in attached courtyards. They read scrolls. Some bath complexes include libraries, gardens, even snack vendors. It's a multifunctional space gym, spa, community center rolled into one. You sit on a stone bench briefly, watching the flow of humanity. For the first time since arriving, you feel almost integrated. Less like an intruder, more like a participant. But survival isn't just about feeling clean. As you head back toward your insula, the streets remind you of reality. A cart splashes muddy water onto your freshly scrubbed legs. Two men shove each other over a gambling dispute. A stray dog noses through refuse. You realize bathing doesn't remove the city, it merely resets you for another round. Still, there's comfort in ritual. In the predictable sequence of warm, hot, cold. In the scrape of the strigil. In shared humanity under vaulted ceilings. You climb the stairs to your room, skin cooling in the evening air. You feel lighter, almost optimistic. Then you catch a faint odor drifting from somewhere below waist, moving through the gutters, perhaps, or a latrine overdue for attention. Cleanliness in Rome is relative. You lie back, muscles relaxed from the heat, and reflect on the contradiction. Rome builds magnificent bathhouses with advanced heating systems, yet still struggles with basic sanitation. Engineering brilliance exists alongside everyday grime. And you, balanced between those extremes, are learning that survival here means accepting both. You can be scrubbed clean at noon and filthy again by dusk, and tomorrow the cycle begins again. By the fifth day, your body has adjusted to the rhythm of Rome, but your nose has not. There is a persistent layer of scent that never quite leaves you. Smoke from cooking fires, damp stone, olive oil, animals. And beneath it all, something sharper, more intimate. The unavoidable reality of a city that produces an enormous amount of waste without the quiet miracle of modern plumbing. You decide bravely, perhaps foolishly, to understand how Rome handles what everyone pretends not to think about. You start with the public latrines. They are not hidden away in embarrassment. They are communal, functional, and surprisingly social. You step into one and pause. Along the walls, a row of stone seats with rounded openings stretches side by side. No partitions, no privacy screens, just open space. This is your mainstream historical anchor. Roman public latrines often consisted of long stone benches with multiple holes, arranged over a continuous flow of water designed to carry waste into the sewer system. The Cloaca Maxima Rome's massive sewer has been operating in some form since the early Republic, channeling waste toward the Tiber River. It is, undeniably, an engineering achievement. You sit cautiously, aware that personal space is not a concept here. To your left, a man discusses chariot race results. To your right, someone hums softly. This is normal. Conversation flows as freely as the water beneath you. At your feet runs a shallow channel of water. In it rests something that requires explanation. A sponge on a stick. There is no toilet paper. Instead, Romans use a tessorium, a sea sponge attached to a wooden handle, shared among users and rinsed in that flowing water channel between uses. You stare at it for a moment longer than socially acceptable. Historians still argue how hygienic this practice truly was. The running water likely reduced contamination, but by modern standards it feels adventurous. You take a breath and remind yourself that adaptation is key. You emerge from the latrine both humbled and slightly philosophical. Outside, you follow the faint slope of the street and notice how cleverly it's constructed. Roman roads are slightly crowned in the middle, allowing rainwater and other liquids to drain into side gutters. The engineering is subtle but deliberate. Rome does not ignore waste, it manages it as best it can. Still, the system has limits. Not every building connects neatly to the sewer. Many residents rely on chamber pots, and as you've already experienced, those pots are sometimes emptied directly into the street, often with a warning shout, "Cave!" Before the splash, you begin to walk with a new awareness, glancing upward as often as forward. Here's a quirky tidbit that might surprise you. Urine, beyond being taxed for cloth cleaning, is also used in some cosmetic treatments. Ammonia acts as a bleaching agent. Teeth whitening with urine is rumored in certain periods, though how widespread that practice truly was is debated. You decide your smile can remain slightly less luminous. As you pass a fuller's workshop, you see men stomping cloth in vats of diluted urine, working it to remove grease and stains. It's industrious, it's practical, it's not exactly aromatic. You start to appreciate that Rome's relationship with waste is pragmatic. Nothing is entirely useless. Everything has potential value. Even what you flush away without thought in your own time becomes commodity here. But sanitation isn't just about smell. It's about health. The Tiber River flows steadily at the city's edge, carrying away sewage from the Cloaca Maxima. It also serves as a source of water for some activities: washing, transport, even, in certain cases, drinking if drawn upstream. The overlap makes you uneasy. Historians still argue about the true impact of sanitation on Roman public health. Some evidence suggests urban Romans suffered from parasites and waterborne illnesses at significant rates. Skeletal remains show signs of intestinal infections, yet the city continues to function generation after generation. You wonder how many invisible battles are being fought inside Roman bodies every day. Later in the afternoon, you return to your insula and notice a worker clearing debris from the gutter. It's a simple act, but it keeps the flow moving. Maintenance is constant. Without it, the system would collapse under its own output. Upstairs, you discover a small crack near the corner of your room, where rainwater must have seeped in during a recent storm. Dampness lingers. Mold is not a word Romans use, but the concept exists all the same. Moisture invites decay. You sit by your window, watching the street below. A woman balances a chamber pot carefully as she crosses toward a disposal point. A child chases a stray cat. A man argues over the price of fish. Life continues, undeterred by odor. And you realize something subtle but important. Your discomfort is partly psychological. You are conditioned to expect invisibility from waste. Hidden pipes, sealed systems, sterile environments. Rome does not offer that illusion. Here, the cycle of consumption and disposal is visible, tangible, sometimes unavoidable. There is honesty in that, even if it assaults your senses. As dusk approaches, a light breeze drifts through the alley, carrying with it a mixture of scents: baking bread, again, faint incense from a nearby shrine, and yes, the underlying note of humanity. You breathe carefully, slowly. Survival here isn't about eliminating discomfort. It's about recalibrating your tolerance. You think back to the baths, to the strigil scraping oil from your skin. Cleanliness was achieved through ritual, not sterility. The same applies to the city. Rome isn't pristine, it's managed, balanced precariously between order and overflow. You lie down that night with a strange sense of respect. The sewer beneath you channels waste through ancient stone corridors. The gutters outside carry runoff toward the river. workers rise each morning to maintain the flow. It's not perfect, but it works most of the time. And in a city of perhaps 1 million people, most of the time might be the difference between endurance and collapse. You close your eyes, aware that even in sleep, Rome's hidden currents continue to move beneath your feet. By the 6th day, Rome stops feeling like a spectacle and starts feeling like a demand. Up until now, you've been observing eating bread, navigating baths, surviving latrines. But survival here isn't passive. Rome expects you to work, and if you don't, Rome has very little patience. You wake before sunrise because labor begins early. The streets are quieter at this hour, a low murmur instead of a roar. You join a stream of workers heading toward markets, workshops, construction sites. The air is cool for now, but you know the heat will rise fast. Your mainstream historical anchor today, the Roman economy is powered heavily by enslaved labor. In certain periods, especially after major military conquests, enslaved people may have made up a third or more of Italy's population. They work in households, mines, farms, construction, shops. Free citizens work too, of course, but the system is built on hierarchy and ownership. You are very aware that your survival depends on not slipping down that hierarchy. If you're a free but poor citizen, your options are limited. You might work as a dock laborer, unloading grain ships along the Tiber. You might assist in a workshop shaping pottery or hammering metal. You might carry messages, haul goods, grind flour. None of it is easy. Today you find yourself helping at a construction site where a new building is rising. Rome is always building. Temples, baths, roads, monuments' ambition is etched in stone. You lift bricks until your shoulders burn. Dust clings to your skin. A foreman shouts instructions. There is no concept of workplace safety standards, no hard hats, no regulated hours. If a scaffold collapses, it collapses. Historians still argue whether working conditions for free laborers were marginally better than for enslaved workers, or simply different in form. Enslaved workers could be punished physically. Free laborers could be dismissed instantly. Either way, your body pays the price. By midday, your hands are blistered. You pause briefly for bread and diluted wine, sitting in the shade of half-finished walls. A fellow worker tells you about a cousin sent to the mines in Hispania. Mining is among the harshest labor in the Empire. Dark tunnels, toxic fumes, frequent collapses. Mortality rates are high. You swallow hard. At least you're above ground. Here's a quirky detail. Some Roman concrete structures are so durable that modern engineers still study their composition. Roman concrete, mixed with volcanic ash, can actually strengthen over time when exposed to seawater. The irony is not lost on you. You are exhausted building structures that may outlast entire civilizations. Work resumes. The rhythm becomes mechanical. Lift. Carry. Set. Repeat. You notice something else. Status is visible even in posture. Wealthy men pass by in clean togas, hands soft, eyes assessing. Their labor is political or administrative, not physical. Beneath them, literally and figuratively, the rest of you strain under stone. Historians still debate how much social mobility truly existed in Rome. There are examples of freed slaves becoming prosperous merchants, even influential figures. But those stories are rare enough to be memorable. For most, the rung you're born on is the rung you stay on. As the sun sinks lower, your muscles tremble with fatigue. There is no guaranteed rest day. Religious festivals may pause work occasionally, but daily survival requires coin. No work means no pay. No pay means less bread. On your walk back through the city, you pass a group of enslaved men chained together, escorted by a guard. Newly arrived captives from a distant campaign, perhaps. Rome's expansion feeds its labor system. Conquest abroad fuels construction at home. You feel the weight of that reality. If fortune turned against you, if you were captured in war or fell into debt you couldn't repay, you could lose your freedom entirely. Debt bondage exists. Legal systems can be unforgiving. And yet, amid the harshness you also glimpse camaraderie. Workers joke with one another, share food, exchange gossip. Laughter erupts unexpectedly at a crude joke. Humans adapt. Even under strain, they find moments of lightness. You climb the stairs to your insula slowly tonight. Every step is an argument between your legs and gravity. Inside your small room, you flex your aching fingers. You think about your modern life, climate-controlled offices, labor laws, weekends. The idea of work-life balance would sound like a foreign language here. Your survival in ancient Rome depends not just on avoiding disease or fire, but on enduring relentless physical effort. If you fall ill, there is no paid sick leave. If you injure your back, there is no compensation claim. You stretch out on your straw mattress, staring at the ceiling beams. Outside, somewhere in the city, an elite dinner party begins. Reclining guests sample multiple courses, perhaps even exotic animals brought from distant provinces. Slaves refill their cups. Music plays softly. Meanwhile, your hands throb. Rome is magnificent, yes. Its roads span continents. Its aqueducts defy gravity. Its monuments proclaim eternity. But those stones are lifted by human bodies. And tonight, yours feels very small beneath the weight of an empire. By the seventh day, you've learned to navigate Rome's streets with a kind of cautious rhythm. You know which alley smells worse in the afternoon heat. You know which baker sells bread that lasts a little longer before going stale. You even know how to keep your purse tucked close beneath your tunic, and that instinct to guard what's yours might be the very thing that keeps you alive today. Because Rome is not just crowded and loud, it is opportunistic. You step into the morning market, weaving through stalls stacked with figs, onions, cheap bossery, and second-hand sandals. The crowd presses tightly. Elbows bump, hands brush. It would be easy, far too easy, for someone to slip a hand into your coin pouch and disappear before you notice. Petty theft is common in Rome. That's your mainstream historical anchor for this section. Urban density creates opportunity. There are professional pickpockets, con artists, and small-time hustlers who thrive in busy markets. Roman satirists complain frequently about thieves in the city, suggesting the problem is widespread enough to be familiar. You feel it before you see it. A light tug at your side. You spin quickly, heart pounding, only to catch a glimpse of a boy no older than 12 darting between legs, vanishing into the mass of bodies. Your pouch is still there, but the message is clear. This city tests your awareness constantly. You move more deliberately now, scanning faces. A group of men loiters near a wine stall, watching passers-by with mild interest that feels slightly too focused. You avoid eye contact and keep walking. It's not just thieves you worry about, it's conflict. Roman law exists, yes. There are courts, magistrates, legal procedures, but justice is not equally distributed. Status matters, wealth matters, citizenship matters. If a dispute arises between you and someone more powerful, your odds are not comforting. Historians still argue how accessible Roman justice truly was to the average citizen. On paper, rights existed. In practice, influence often tilted outcomes. You overhear an argument escalating nearby. Two men accuse each other of cheating in a business deal. Voices rise. A small crowd gathers. Romans love a spectacle, even a minor one. Eventually, a local official intervenes, threatening fines. The tension disperses, but your pulse remains elevated. Punishments in Rome can be severe, especially for lower status individuals. Fines, beatings, forced labor. Public humiliation is common. Crucifixion exists, though typically reserved for slaves and non-citizens accused of serious crimes. You don't dwell on that image long. This is still a sleepy evening story, after all, but the reality hovers quietly in the background. You remind yourself to stay invisible, blend in. Avoid drawing attention. As you pass beneath an archway, you notice carved notices on a nearby wall, announcements about upcoming games, political messages, graffiti scrawled by everyday Romans. One reads something crude about a local politician. Another advertises a lost slave. Information travels by voice and wall alike. Here's a quirky tidbit. Romans frequently used cursed tablets, thin sheets of lead, inscribed with spells, asking the gods to punish thieves or rivals. These tablets were often folded and tossed into wells or graves to invoke supernatural enforcement. If someone steals from you, you might not just report them. You might curse them. You make a mental note. Divine backup could be useful. Midday heat presses down again. You duck into the shade of a colonnade near the forum. A public speaker is addressing a small group about civic virtue. His toga is pristine. His rhetoric is confident. You notice how quickly the crowd shifts from curiosity to distraction. Attention spans, it seems, have always been fragile. Nearby, a pair of soldiers patrols casually. Their presence is reassuring and intimidating at once. Rome maintains order through visible authority. The Praetorian Guard protects the emperor. Urban cohorts handle policing duties within the city. Their armor gleams faintly in the sun. You think about what would happen if you were accused of something. Could you defend yourself effectively in Latin? Could you navigate complex legal customs? The thought alone makes you tread even more carefully. Historians still debate whether crime rates in Rome were truly higher than in other ancient cities, or simply more documented because of Rome's size and surviving literature. Either way, perception shapes behavior, and you perceive risk everywhere. As evening approaches, you take a longer route back to your insula, avoiding narrower alleys where shadows linger too long. You pass a tavern where laughter spills into the street. Inside, men gamble with small bone dice. Money changes hands quickly. Tempers could flare just as fast. You realize how thin the line is between order and chaos. Rome's grandeur depends on millions of daily interactions not spiraling out of control. Most of the time, they don't. But sometimes, they do. You reach your building and climb the stairs, listening to each footstep echo. Inside your room, you check your coin pouch again. Still safe. You sit down, letting your breathing slow. Survival here is not just physical endurance, it's vigilance. Constant awareness of who stands beside you, who walks behind you, who watches from across the street. In your own time, you might stroll through a city distracted by a glowing screen in your hand. Here, distraction is dangerous. You lie back on your mattress, replaying the tug at your purse, a reminder that Rome is not sentimental. It rewards the sharp and punishes the careless. Outside, voices fade gradually as night deepens. Somewhere, a distant cheer rises, perhaps from a late chariot race recap or a tavern dispute resolved in laughter. You close your eyes, knowing that today, at least, you kept your freedom, your coin, and your dignity intact. In Rome, that counts as a victory, and yet, you sense that tomorrow's challenges will demand even more from you. The city never truly relaxes, and neither can you. By now, Rome has trained your senses to expect noise, heat, and unpredictability. But today, the energy in the streets feels different. Charged, anticipatory, you follow the current of the crowd almost without thinking, pulled along by excitement that vibrates through stone. Vendors shout louder than usual. Children weave between adults clutching small clay tokens. Someone waves a scrap of fabric dyed in bright teen colors. You hear it before you see it. The low rolling roar of thousands of voices merging into one. The amphitheater rises ahead of you in staggering stone arcs. If you are in the 1st century AD, it may even be the newly built Flavian amphitheater, what your modern mind calls the Colosseum, your mainstream historical anchor. This massive structure could hold somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 spectators, depending on the period and configuration. It is an architectural marvel completed under Emperor Titus in 80 AD, and used for gladiatorial games, animal hunts, and public spectacles. You hesitate at the entrance. Part of you knows you probably shouldn't be here. But survival in Rome also means understanding what Rome values. And Rome values spectacle. You enter with the crowd, guided to your section by attendants, who glance at your clothing to determine your place. Seating is rigidly stratified, senators closest to the arena, knights behind them, ordinary male citizens higher up, women and the poorest often relegated to the upper tiers. You climb, step after stone step, until you reach a seat that feels both vertiginous and precarious. The arena floor stretches below, covered in sand arena in Latin, from which arena derives. The games begin with pageantry. Trumpets blare. Processions of gladiators march across the sand. Some are heavily armored, others lightly equipped. You notice the variety Mamillo with a large shield and fish-crested helmet, Rutierius with a net and trident. Historians still argue whether gladiators were universally viewed as heroes or merely as disposable entertainers. In reality, it seems more complicated. They were often enslaved men, prisoners of war or criminals, but some were volunteers seeking fame and fortune. Their survival odds varied by era and event. Not every fight ended in death, despite popular imagination. The first clash begins. Steel meets steel with a ringing crack that echoes up to your seat. The crowd roars approval. You feel the vibration in your chest. The fighters circle, sand kicking up around their feet. One stumbles. A gasp ripples outward. You realize something unsettling. The crowd's mood matters. The editor, the official overseeing the games, may consider audience reaction when deciding a defeated gladiator's fate. The famous thumbs gesture, its exact meaning is debated. Historians still argue whether a thumbs up meant mercy or death, as ancient sources are frustratingly vague. But the symbolism of collective judgment is clear. You watch as one fighter yields, raising a finger in submission. The other stands over him, chest heaving. The editor gestures. The crowd reacts, some shouting for mercy, others for blood. You swallow. The defeated man is spared this time. The arena attendants drag him away for medical treatment. Yes, there are doctors assigned to gladiators. Valuable investments must be maintained. Skilled fighters are expensive to train. Between bouts, exotic animals are brought into the arena: lions, leopards, even bears imported from distant provinces. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some spectacles featured elaborate staged hunts called venations, where animals were released into carefully designed scenery, sometimes complete with artificial trees and rocks. The logistics of transporting and maintaining these animals across the empire are staggering. You watch as a handler demonstrates control over a massive beast before a dramatic confrontation unfolds. The crowd loves it. You begin to understand that the games serve multiple purposes. They entertain, yes, but they also reinforce power. They display Rome's reach: animals from Africa, fighters from conquered lands, architecture that dwarfs human scale, bread and circuses. The phrase echoes in your mind. Earlier this week, you stood in line for grain. Now you sit in a sea of spectators watching controlled violence. Together, food and spectacle help maintain social order, keep the masses fed and distracted. But distraction has a cost. You glance around at the faces near you. Some are ecstatic. Some are grim. Some look almost